Okay, it looks like we're live finally.
Okay, it's 5:02. Welcome to the Legislative Action Committee of the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. Thank you all so much for joining. I know we moved up the meeting by an hour, so we're really grateful that we're still able to get quorum. Andy, do you want to do roll call?
Yes, I do.
you.
Okay, so we're going to Sunnyvale,
Here.
Saratoga,
Here.
Santa Clara,
Here.
San Jose, I hear will be coming. Palo Alto,
Here.
Mountain View at the PAC meeting, Morgan Hill at the PAC meeting, Montecito, Milpitas, okay, Los Gatos,
Here.
Los Altos Hills,
Here.
Los
Yay.
Altos, Gilroy. No, I think they're not here today. Cupertino.
Here.
Okay, and also Campbell.
Here.
Great. All right, we have a quorum.
Thanks, Andy. Then let's move to the consent agenda. The only item is approval of the minutes from our August meeting. Are there any questions or items for discussion? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, who gave me the second?
Second.
Awesome, thank you, Liz.
Marilyn moved and then Liz second.
Got it, thank you. Okay, so I'll take the roll. Campbell? Liz, you're on mute.
Yes.
Great. Cupertino,
Aye.
Gilroy, Los Altos, Nisa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Los Altos Hills,
Yes.
Los Gatos,
Here. Yes.
Milpitas, Montecito.
One of those days, Mariko.
I'm glad I am not the only one. Morgan Hill, Mountain View, Palo Alto,
Here. Yes.
San Jose. Sorry, Santa Clara.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Saratoga. Is that a yes, Mary Lynn?
That was an I. Yes.
Sunnyvale.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. 10 yeses, no abstentions, no nos, and 5 absent.
Thanks, Andy. With everything happening right now, it's good to laugh. So happy to have this meeting with all of you, and I hope everybody's doing well. So we're going to move to item number 3, which is discussion and consideration of the 3 county measures. And we actually have a speaker on Measure RR, which is the Caltrain measure. And I'll say it for the record, Andy and I actually tried to get a speaker that is against Measure RR just to have a balanced discussion before we vote on whether or not we want to support this measure. And unfortunately, we weren't able to find any speakers against the measure. So we still invited Jason, who is in favor and a big proponent of the measure. We're all familiar with the work they have been doing. So Jason, I'm going to invite you to convince us why we should support Measure RR, why it would benefit our individual cities and the broader county and region. And I know Andy told you 5 minutes. If you need a couple more minutes, that's fine, because we don't have someone speaking against the measure. I actually did a quick research so I could actually, ask 2 questions that I've seen the opposition raise, but we'll do that after you've made your presentation. So go ahead, Jason.
And can I just
Great,
ask
thanks.
you
It
real
looks like
quick, can everyone see the slide? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I can't tell you how hard it was for me not to answer in the roll call when you called Campbell, but I restrained myself. It looks like you have the presentation up. I'll go through it pretty quickly because I think a lot of you folks know this information already. This is Measure RR, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, who I now work for, sponsored the legislation to allow this happen a number of years ago, and now it's finally made its way to the ballot. And you can just, next slide, please. Sorry, it's hard not to drive. Measure RR is about rescuing Caltrain because it really is in serious trouble right now because of COVID, relieving traffic and reducing pollution. It's, right now Caltrain is essential to the Bay Area's transportation network. It's a backbone. You'll never get right of way down the kind of land where Caltrain runs if we were to lose Caltrain. But Caltrain runs on, and sorry, next slide. I'm already a couple slides ahead. I'm trying to go through it quickly. So Measure Caltrain runs on fare box recovery. 70% of Caltrain's fares or budget is fare box recovery. And that's great. It shows that customers want to ride Caltrain, but it also means that Caltrain is particularly vulnerable to downturns like we're having now because people aren't riding the trains at the moment. And to have such an important backbone of our transportation system vulnerable is another reason why it's important to give Caltrain the one thing that it doesn't have that other rail agencies like it have, which is its own dedicated source of operating funds. So it doesn't just have to rely on fare box recovery and frankly gifts from VTA and SF Muni. We know the pandemic won't last forever. Traffic's going to come back, and it'll be so much worse if Caltrain isn't up and running and made better. Next slide, please. So Measure RR is a 1/8 of 1 cent sales tax, 3 countywide, San Francisco, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County. Means it's about a penny on an $8 purchase. It's expected to raise about $100 million annually for Caltrain. It is a sales tax. Sales taxes are regressive. We know that, and we've tried to take that into account in this. But essentials like groceries, rent, and medicine are exempt from sales taxes. The measure does have a sunset. It sunsets after 30 years, and it requires 2/3 majority to pass. Next slide, please. So it does a bunch of good stuff. What this comes down to is it reduces pollution. It gets a bunch of cars off the roads and onto Caltrain. So it helps people, both Caltrain riders in their quality of life, but also people who are still driving. It gets a lot of cars out from in front of them. In addition to saving Caltrain from the real serious problems it's having with COVID, it also helps work towards that Caltrain expansion that we've talked about for a long time. Much more frequent all-day service, which has equitable benefits because there are folks who don't have a job that allows them to commute during the traditional peak times, but still would like to take transit to do that. And this would help those commuters. It also increases rider and pedestrian safety. And as I mentioned, this helps get money back to VTA and Samtrans and Muni so they can provide more service, including to their low-income riders. Next slide, please. In terms of the growth scenarios, this is what some of you have heard about for a while, the potential to triple ridership on Caltrain from 65,000 riders every day. That's 65,000 people riding trains that are on traffic, tripling that to 180,000 riders per day by basically making much more frequent train service that people will actually use. More express trains, bullet trains, so you can get to where you need to go more quickly. Next slide, please. This is just a way to talk about how much traffic this would relieve. It would put essentially the equivalent of 2 lanes of traffic on Caltrain instead of highways. This isn't getting rid of lanes or anything like this. This is just saying that many more people will be riding Caltrain. And I think we can go this. This talks about more trains a day. We can go to the next slide just for time purposes. And this is probably a little bit hard to read in this format. And it was confusing to me the first 11 times I saw it in a Caltrain presentation. But what this says is there'll be a lot more express trains, a lot more bullet trains. So rather than having to do those milk runs that I know frustrate everybody, this Measure RR and Caltrain's vision will really make this like BART-like service for, and that will gain BART-like ridership. It'll be frequent, fast, and express trains. On the equity piece, I also did want to mention that this will help Caltrain keep in place their means-based fare program. They've got a pilot program now through MTC, up to 50% discounts, and this will help them continue to fund that beyond a pilot and make it real, so that will be much more affordable to everyone. All right, next slide, please. I'm not surprised you had a hard time finding somebody to oppose this. We've, 7 boards and commissions had to vote yes on this to get it on the ballot. It wasn't easy. You probably saw some stuff in the papers about some disagreements about governance, but at the end of the day, these 7 boards and commissions, or 7 boards, voted to put this in the ballot because they all agreed on one thing, which is that this is important to fund Caltrain. Next slide, please. It polls at about the 2/3 level, but after folks get the positive messaging, it gets up to 70%. So that's why we're going to run a strong campaign, and we're asking you folks to help us get out the word if you approve of this measure. Go ahead. Just to give you, we've got over 100 and over 120, I think, endorsements by last count. To give you an idea of what kind of range that is, we've got here the ballot argument signers. This isn't a list of our endorsers. This is just the people who are kind enough to sign the ballot arguments for us in the 4 days we had to collect that between the time this sort of got on the ballot as a surprise and the time we actually had to give them ballot arguments. So you'll see, Mayor Liccardo and Supervisor Chavez both signed on. They don't always sign on to everything together. We've got the endorsement of the South Bay Labor Council and also the Silicon Valley Organization, our chamber. This really does cut across the board in terms of endorsements. Next slide, please. I think there's a little more of a list. Here's the rebuttals: Senator Feinstein, Congresswoman Eshoo. It really does, Assemblymember Chu. A lot of folks are putting their names behind this to really show how important it is. More people, including, I think, a couple nice folks here. And we're reaching out and taking more endorsements all the time. If you end up supporting this, send me an email. I can add you on the list where we've got most elected officials in Santa Clara County. And I think that's all I need to say, because there's the last slide. But I'm happy to answer your questions. And thank you to those of you who have signed on. We at the leadership group have been doing a lot of work trying to get to reach out to you. Thank you, Margaret, for signing on to the ballot at the last minute. One of those over the weekend, hey, we've got a ballot argument to sign. We're rocking and rolling. It really helps to have good leaders stand up in that way. So you said you had 2 questions for me.
I'll hold off on my questions and open it up for questions from the members, Jason, but thank you for that presentation.
Yep.
Any questions for Jason?
There's 2 hands raised.
Okay. So I see Steve. Mayor Scharf, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, how many cars does Caltrain take off the road? You said it takes cars off the road. Can you quantify that?
It's the equivalent of about 2 lanes of traffic. With the expansion on 101. So if you could add 2 more lanes and they would get filled up because of induced demand, and that amount of cars is about what it is. I don't know what the number is. I should know that, but I don't.
All right. So you don't know that.
Okay.
And then you said
it's
this gets more money to TA, Samtrans, and Muni. So is all the money not going to Caltrain?
So all the money goes to Caltrain, but right now, Muni and VTA and Samtrans have to give money to Caltrain to keep
okay. So the subsidies they're giving, they would not be giving anymore. And
correct.
That's why
for operating funds
they end up getting more money. Okay, those are that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Scharf. Councilmember Niz.
Hi. Hi, Jason.
Hi.
One question regarding the timing. Of all years, we're going when Caltrain is barely full. What was the thinking about going out now when it's at its the opposite of peak?
Yeah. We were concerned. We wanted to make sure that people got that. But the fact is, it's still a presidential election year.
So it was a bird in the hand?
We expect there'll be record turnout. And I mean, Caltrain really needs the money right now. So we did the polling, and I tell you, I was surprised at how many people, when there was no traffic. The last poll we did was the public poll Caltrain did in, I think, June. How many people, when there was 0 traffic, still said traffic is one of my #1 priorities. And this still polled even in the middle of the pandemic, almost exactly in line with the other 9 leadership group polls we've done on Caltrain, which is it's right about that 2/3 mark. And if we can get enough support, it goes up even farther. So we figured, yeah, bird in the hand. And there's never been a time when it's been more clear. Like we've been behind this for, since 2011, just for the expansion, just for the benefits to the environment and to traffic. But now there's never been a time that's been more clear that they really need the money for stability purposes.
Thanks.
And Councilmember Nis just asked one of my two questions that the opposition has raised, Jason. Next, we have Mayor Abikoga.
Thank you. Yes, so I've had folks I was surprised to hear from say that they're not excited about this, so they may not support it. And the issue is that it's a sales tax, so it's regressive. How have you been responding to that concern?
So a couple ways. First of all, I mean, it is a regressive tax, but it's for some progressive means, including allowing that 50% means-based fare. So it gets some good things done. It substantially helps with pollution, and we know that pollution helps impacts communities of color and low-income communities more than other communities, and so the pollution benefits benefit them more. It's, you know, every dollar is a lot, but a 1/8 of one sales tax is a lot different than, like, for instance, the faster measure with a full cent. So we think the impact will be a little bit less, and the benefits will be so great. And then there's something else I was going to say, and I forget, but I will tell you in 1 second. But that's, I mean, that's the piece of it. This really will help a lot of folks. Unfortunately, this is the way we fund transit in California. Other folks don't do it this way. The other thing I was going to say is that a lot of this money goes for operations to help operate trains, and you can't do that with a partial tax or some other mechanisms. And because you need 2/3 to pass these measures, there's a lot of mechanisms that are essentially unavailable to us, because as soon as somebody writes a big check, and then it fails. And we saw this in Faster, and we saw this with this polling. We polled, I think, 5 different measures, and every one of them, when you need 2/3 mark, if there's big funded opposition, you just lose. You know, because there's always about 1/3 of people who are kind of cranky about everything, and so you really got to get those 2/3. And as soon as somebody has well-funded opposition, so, you know, if you do a millionaire's tax or a business tax, even if the leadership group, you know, totally off, somebody would write a check, and it just makes it really hard at 2/3. So until we have a 50% ability to raise money for measures like this, I think it's and that's one of the reasons why sales tax has often been used for transit measures.
Thanks, Margaret. And Jason, that was my second question, but I'll think of a third. Next, we have Mayor Wu.
Hi, this is Michelle. I have a very simple question. I was just wondering, you mentioned that someone said even given the COVID-19, everybody work from home, shelter in place, and there's no traffic, and people still put a traffic as #1 concern. How legit is that when you have the road empty and you can pretty much drive anywhere without any traffic? Why were they saying that they're still concerned about the traffic? That's one thing. It's that what my question is, the Caltrain is suffering because of the telecommute or work from home. I mean, you in your slide you said it will return to normal. I'm not quite sure the old way is going to be normal. Perhaps in the future, telecommute will be part of the normal, you know, just the way it is. That always going to be a telecommute. So that's just something that I want to kind of like say. And Caltrain, I'm sure this is important, but it would not be running as what it was before the COVID-19, that working from home has not been largely promoted. And I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. And look, as VP of Transportation at the leadership group, I'm very interested in the potential for remote work and the potential to have some of that be another tool in our toolbox to reduce pollution. The fact is that there's a ton of jobs that just can't be done remotely, and there are people who are on the Caltrain trains now and on the roads now because their jobs, including a lot of our essential workers, you know, who are out there every day, who need trains, need transit, and it needs to still run for. I need to be able to go into work, and that will never change. I also don't think it's a long discussion about remote work, but I think that the shelter in place where so many people are working remotely every day of the week is I think very different than what might end up happening, where maybe it's a couple days a week, but it's not all the time. I mean, this is pretty dramatic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Next, Councilmember Davis.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Jason, so I guess my question kind of goes along everybody else's questions. How are you going to market this and when? Because you have a short window to the election. And how are you going to keep the naysayers from really destroying what you're trying to do? So I'm curious because I kind of agree with some of the questions that have been asked. People are going to work, but you're going to have a major, we don't know how long COVID's going to last. So this is pretty risky that I think on my part. I mean, our city is in support of this, not to say anything wrong here, but I'm just from my point of view, being elected and watching what's going on right now, people don't know when they're going to be full-time going back to work or what's going to happen. So I'm really concerned about the future, but how are you going to market it? I mean, how are you going to get this through to make it better for the South Bay area, any Bay area? In fact, you know, all 9 Bay areas have traffic issues, bar none. So could you explain to me what the strategy is for making sure that you're going to get a full success at the election box?
Yeah, so and we, like I say, we start out at just about, I mean, just about the 2/3 level, and it's a matter, and we know that when we give people the positive messaging, it goes up to 70%. When we talk to them about, look, traffic's going to come back, pollution, we need to find ways to beat pollution.